The date is October 2024. It's a gloomy day in Cleveland. And after an offseason spent licking their wounds from getting punched in the mouth by the Celtics, it felt like even gloomier days were ahead. I can't personally speak for Cavs fanskews, I don't know any, and I'm honestly not fully sure Ohio's a real place. Booty can't imagine they were too thrilled. They made virtually no roster change unless you count the signing of JT Thor. It just fired the coach that turned him from laughingstock to playoff contender. And most importantly, they didn't Salvino the issues from the previous season, including adding more firepower, but there was something strange happening in Cleveland. Because as soon as the 2025 season kicked off, all those outs disappeared almost instantly. The Cavs rattled off 13 straight wins. The core guys were clicking, and the biggest surprise, they finally got the spark they were missing from one of the likeliest sources. Enter Ty Jerome, a player who made benchwarming look like an Olympic sport in 2024. But this past season, there's no other way to put it. This guy was an absolute dog. After averaging just 2 points a game, has suddenly emerged as a captain of the bench. Unit White Man Can't jumped his way into a top 3 finish for 6th Man of the Year and looked poised for a massive payday, either as a starting point guard elsewhere or a key piece of Cleveland's future. But now in the present day, none of that came true. The Cavs let him walk without a second thought. He signed a small deal to back up John Marr in Memphis. All that momentum vanished like a magic trick. So where did it all go wrong? Well, what if I told you a high-end player on a #1 seed lost millions of dollars in just 1 week? Would you believe me? If not, here's a tragic story of Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome, I feel like some of you need a reminder of just how good Ty Jerome was last season. Because if you weren't paying attention, and I think the cool kids call that being a casual these days, probably didn't realize how serious this guy's performance was. If you wanted Torg that Jerome was the best backup guard in the entire league, you'd actually have a strong case. In under 20 minutes a night playing behind tool-star guards, not only did he hold his own, he looked like a legitimate starter. In games where he played 30-plus minutes, Jerome was a freaking beast. He averaged 23 and 4 on video game level efficiency, and filling in for Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell isn't exactly easy. But somehow he made it look routine. Like, yeah, I really doubt this. He's not the fastest guy in the world, and it's still unclear if he can even dunk. Trust me, I looked and I couldn't find a single clip. But none of that holds back his offensive game. He can shoot, he can take care of the ball, and he's a really capable playmaker, which shows up in his high assist-to-turnover ratio. People also forget Ty Jerome is a 6'5" point guard. That size lets him see over defenses, make plays for others, and shoot over smart defenders. But in my opinion, Jerome's real superpower is his floater game. Let's be honest, nobody's losing sleep over Ty Jerome getting to the rim. Honestly, if you bought me some tennis shoes and convinced me to get out off bead, I might be able to stop him. Probably not. But you get the idea. Jerome's not a real threat to score a basket, but what he is self-aware. He knows he's not going to toy him in on anyone. So, what does he do? Got in the lab and mastered this little push shot, stopping just before the paint to float it up. Here's the thing, nobody in the NBA did it better. Jerome shot 209 floaters this year, which was 9th most in the league. Buth paired that elite volume with elite efficiency, shooting 57.4%, which would have been good for 2nd in the NBA. Put simply, based on both the numbers and film, Ty Jerome was an elite offensive player. Last season, and just how elite you ask? Well, over the past 20 seasons, only 3 players have posted a season with a 20% plus assist rate, 2.5% plus steal rate, 43% from 3, and 60% true shooting. Ty Jerome last year, Steph Curry was the other, and Jeremy Lin did it with the Lakers. Kidding. Steph somehow did it twice. But that is some elite company, Tobe. And anytime your name shows up next to a top 10 player of all time, you're obviously doing something right. Anthus wasn't one of those he's just along for the ride with. A stacked TM situations. Jerome wasn't just on a good team. He was helping them win in real measurable ways and was a historically good bench player when it came to impact. He didn't end up winning 6th Man of the Year. Payne Pritchard took a Tommy. But if you stack Jerome's win shares and offensive win shares up against the past decade of winners, his numbers are right at the top. In short, everything was lining up for him to secure the bag this offseason. He was producing at a high level, impacted winning, proving all of his value. But nobody could have predicted what the pad next, because in just 1 week, all of that promise he had was all of a sudden gone. The collapse after locking up the #1 seed and entering the playoffs is one of Theffer rights to win it all. Confidence Vasca high for Cavs fans heading into their matchup with the Pacers. Even with Darius Garland out, Cleveland was still favorite with Ty Jerome expected to step in and fill that void. But what no one realized, least of all Jerome, was that this series would change his career forever. Game 1, Jerome came off the bench like usual and actually had a solid stat line. 21 points, 8 assists in 29 minutes. But if you watched the game, the writing was already on through. It wasn't just that he shot 8 for 20. It was how he struggled that made people concerned. The Pacers, led by some serious bloodhounds on the defensive end, had him scouted to perfection. They pressured him higher up the floor, exposed his lack of burst, and completely neutralized his favorite move. Jerome got blocked 5 times in that game. 5, which has to be some kind of record because my god did they have him in Alcatraz. Indiana Clarlick knew what was coming, and they were sitting on that floater knowing he would tree. Now to be fair, 2-1-8 isn't a bad night, especially in a Game 1 loss where the Cavs had bigger issues. But signs were there, and for those who look closely, the unraveling had already begun. Because as we go into Game 2, This was the game that really changed everything. Down 1 in the series and still without Darius Garland, the Cavs made the move to insert Ty Jerome into the starting lineup. And with their backs against the wall, this was the game for Jerome to prove to the basketball world that he could be a starter on the high stage. But it brings no joy in saying this. But what came next was probably the worst game in Ty Jerome's career. In 28 minutes, when the Cavs needed him most, Jerome put up 2 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and went 1 for 14 from the floor. No, Thaddeus, not a typo. Jerome was completely flustered in this game, as he was turning the ball over and trying really hard to get a shot off. But nothing was going his way. And then just to cap it off, Tyrese Haliburton saved him down and buried the game winner right in his face. A brutal exclamation point on an already disastrous night. Now down 200 in Asaris, they were favored to win, with Jerome doing his best homer. Simpson impression. This felt like the game thought swung the public perception of Jerome as a player. This once underrated offensive him, praised for thriving behind tool stars, was suddenly seen as alien ability. And in Game 3, let's just say it didn't do him any favors. Good news for the Cavs. They got a limited Darius Garland back in the lineup. Okay, wasn't the only change they mad back, as not only did Jerome return to his bench role, Kenny Atkinson looked at the first 2 games and decided to demit him to just 13 minutes. 3 other guys played ahead of him off the bench. So Jerome went from 6th man off the year candidate to 9th man on the bench. And in those 13 minutes, he played even worse than he did in Game 2. Jerome finished with 2 points, 1 rebound and 0 assists, a 1 for 8 shooting, and 3 turnovers. And the worst part about this is in a 22-point blowout win, Jerome somehow finished with a -15 plus-minus. Heckle didn't get anything to fall. He was dribbling the ball off his foot. And what stood out most was the Cavs left the myth, enduring garbage time to try to get him back on track. But at that point, it felt like it was already gone. And in Game 4, it almost felt like that energy was contagious for the rest off team, because, how do I put this nicely? The Cavs got belt to ass. The Pacers led by 41 points at halftime. And while Jerome technically had a solo game by his standards, 7 points, 2 rebounds, 0 assists, and over 50% shooting, it didn't feel like it watching live. And there were 2 major takeaways from this game. The first way to test is Jerome was complete a light of sorts, continuing to turn the ball over and falling all over the balls. But none of this was as glaring as the second thing. Because in this game, the Pacers figured out that not only was Jerome a liability on the offensive end, he was also someone they could pick on defense. They continuously went at him, and Jerome was really struggling on that end of the floor. And knowing that heading into Game 5, this was the game the Cavs finally pulled the plug, because Jeremiah is cut from the rotation entirely. Hadn't played at all in the first half. But after Garland was hobbling, and the Cavs went on an offensive, Drew Day decided to roll the dice and bring in the main man himself. And he wash-upping. Came into the third quarter and dropped a quick 6 points. And for a second there, it looked like we got Ty Jerome of old. But let me not speak too soon, because on the flip side, it's opened the door for the Pacers' toe tack. Him on defense. And just like in Game 4, it was almost too easy for Indiana to score. Never in my life have I seen Haliburton dunk on some Wayne Bohr. But yeah, I guess that happened. But if there was any play that summed up Jerome's series, it would be this one. He gets blocked on one end, trying to toss shoot his floater, and after he sprints back, trying to body up Haliburton on the fast break, Tyree drops, and Anane yells in his face and effectively sends Cavs home.
So what did we learn from this Ty Jerome experiment?
Was Theta Quay that he's just not a good player, or he's a product of the Cavs system? No, because those things aren't true. Ty Jerome is still a very good player, but more specifically, he's a great player in the regular season. As mock as these talking heads make it out OB, and as cliche as it sounds, there's a real discrepancy between 82-game guys and 16-game guys. And Jerome, at least for now, fits more in Thefemer. Best example of this is comparing someone like Andrew Nahard. We saw how valuable he was to the Pacers, but if you compare regular season numbers, Ty Jerome is objectively a better player. It's just a complete different game. Can't compare a Plesto bananas or oranges, whatever the thing is, because playoff. Basketball requires a different sort of player. Now, this doesn't mean all hope is lost for Ty Jerome. He's still a young guy. He's already shown over the course of AFL season that he can be a high contributor, and now in Memphis, he can get a fresh start, a chance to rewrite the narrative, and erase the sting of last year's postseason collapse because he's close with his current contract and the level of play he's shown. If he can make himself viable in the playoffs, we're looking at one of the most valuable players in the league on a per-daler basis. Do I think Ty Jerome can bounce back? I do. I truly in my heart think he can bounce back. But can and will he is a separate question that I'm curious to see what the answer is. Goodbye now.